Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick. Wanted to do a quick episode to talk about the Carl Lawson acquisition, a few things about this signing. You may not know him as a player, and there's some background here, but he was out there on the market for a long time. There are some reasons why, and I wanted to just go through that as we do. Obviously, signed to the Ravens practice squad yesterday. And will not be active for Sunday's game against the Bears, we are told, which does leave the Ravens with a big hole to fill in terms of the snaps that were lost with the IRing of Tavius Robinson. So I am expecting that either Malik Ham or Kyman Rucker will be elevated from the practice squad for this week. They need actually a lot of snaps. It wouldn't be impossible that both would somehow be moved to the 53. They have a spot, which we presume is going to go to Tyler Huntley as the third quarterback, but Huntley is also a player who could be activated for a game or elevated for a game as well. So any of those are options would be possible. Some moving pieces are involved. The Ravens will apparently go with 4 outside linebackers for the game against the Bears. They have Green and Van Noy, who are, of course, the workhorses now within the system. David Ajabo is still around and has played some snaps. More will be required of him this week, I'm sure. Probably more on early downs. They may ask Ajabo to be more of a run defender, which this should be interesting. And then Ham and or Rucker would be the fourth or fifth player to be added to the team. Rucker, pretty good record as a pass rusher from his college days at North Carolina. Ham, third year now in the NFL, which is unfortunate. Rucker's a rookie, but Ham in his third year lost his first 2 seasons entirely due to injury. Has never played an NFL snap, and this will be his debut if he plays. Baltimore kid, a nice story that he's finally making, and hopefully he can make a contribution on special teams, play a fair amount of snaps on defense as well, because the Ravens really need someone to step up in this regard. But anyway, this show's about Carl Lawson. I want to talk a little bit about his career. He was drafted in round 4, number 117 by the Bengals in 2017. He is now 30 years old as of June 29th. So 30's in the rearview mirror. A little bit of an undersized guy, not necessarily in terms of his weight. He's 6'2", 260, which is, good solid size for his for an edge rusher, but he is 31.5-inch arms, which is particularly short for an edge rusher. I'd say particularly for a mid-size height guy. Now, edge rushers can be 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". He played with Dunlap, for example, who gave the Ravens a lot of problems over the years with his length. That's not who Carl Lawson is. Now, that said, he has a pretty good record of rushing the passer for his career, and in particular of getting the quarterback on the ground. He's gotten older, but he's got 32 career sacks, 122 quarterback hits in 7 healthy seasons. And that included 5 sacks with Dallas last year, where he didn't have a particularly good year. I'll get into that a little bit later. Penalties, he's got 8 personal fouls in his career. That, by the way, personal fouls are a very natural consequence of putting the quarterback on the ground. It's very hard to avoid personal fouls if you knock the quarterback down a lot. And he's knocked the quarterback down 122 times and only got 8 personal fouls, which that 15.25 to 1 relationship is quite good for a pass rusher. So that is definitely a positive of Carl Lawson. Is he seems to understand how to avoid roughing the passer penalties. He has had a couple other personal fouls, unnecessary roughness, and things like that probably were not perpetrated upon the quarterback. They might have been on a run or something, but other personal fouls that come up. If there's a fighting or a taunting or something, he's never had one of those penalties that I can see in the penalties that are listed out in NFL GSIS. In terms of other penalties, he's had 15 among the combination of defensive offsides, neutral zone infractions, and encroachment. Now, I realized after doing this, though I'm not sure if people care that much, but a defensive offside is really a much more serious penalty than either a neutral zone infraction or an encroachment. Why? They're all 5 yards. They're all come from that same family of penalties. But a defensive offsides, unless it is unabated to the quarterback, it does not blow the play dead. Oftentimes, the offense will get a free play on such snaps, and you'll even hear it said, free play. and the quarterback will know it's time to put the ball up and try and make a big play down the field. So has been a little bit jumpy over the years. I wouldn't say he's worse than many of the top edge rushers. If you look at Micah Parsons' career penalty totals, I think he's been penalized 32 times in 5 seasons, and Lawson has been penalized a total of 26 times in a longer career. Lawson also has 3 illegal use of hands penalties. Those are serious as well. They always grant a first down, even though they're only a 5-yard penalty. So penalty-wise, I'd say the picture is pretty good for Lawson in terms of what he's done career relative to the number of times he's put the quarterback on the ground. It's just something you pay for. Nnamdi Madubuike, it didn't have a great year sack-wise last year, and he had 4 roughing the passer penalties. So we can see that's not something you want. You look back to Courtney Upshaw's career at the Ravens. I believe he had 7 sacks and 8 personal fouls during his career with the Ravens. So that obviously is not what they would have wanted there either. So Lawson, by comparison, has a pretty clean rap sheet. He's been used as a situational pass rusher for the bulk of his career, including in 2024, when he was used on 305 pass plays and only 97 run plays. It's a very high 3-to-1 relationship. You don't usually see that in today's game, not as often anymore. There are some guys who are just rookies, or they're very seasoned pass rushers at the end of their career that can have higher relationships than that. I think Owe had a fairly high relationship with the Ravens this year. Don't have it right in front of me, but it was in that 3-to-1 range also, I believe. So he's being used in exactly the way that you would expect him to be used for the Ravens, I think. From 2019 to 23, that was kind of the bridge part of his career, his 3rd and 4th seasons at Cincinnati. Then he lost the 2021 season, I believe it was. Then he played 22 with the Jets. And even 23, he was injured a fair amount of that season for the Jets as well. But during that era, the snaps he played much more balanced between run and pass. It was more like a 2-to-1 relationship. Whereas if you look outside of those years, it's much more extreme. For his career, he's played 2,141 pass snaps, 907 run snaps. So about a 2 1/3 to 1 relationship between the two. Not extraordinarily high for a guy who's known as a situational pass rusher. He did have a couple of years in there where he played just frankly more snaps. He was over 700 snaps one year. So he has had some experience playing a full rotational role, or being a lead rotational role, I'll say, particularly in that year with the Jets, and his last year with Cincy as well. Last year, and obviously the most recent data, always the most pertinent, he finished there are 100. I'll set this up. There are 119 edge rushers who had at least 119, also coincidentally, pass rush snaps they had. He finished 71st in PFF's pass rush productivity statistic, and that adds up. It basically is crediting pressures highly and a little more for sacks. But he finished 71st among those 119. And by comparison, the Ravens guys, Owe was 18th in the league. Sorry, Van Noy was 18th. Owe was 40th, so still very good. Tavius Robinson, 108th, and Ajabo, 112th. Now, one thing to think about with regard to those numbers is guys who play on early downs don't get adjusted in some way for pass rush productivity, or guys who effectively play downs where they can pin their ears back and go after the quarterback, don't get penalized in some way. They have done, PFF's done some work on that. Timo Riska did some work in looking at an N factor model of how easy it was to rush the quarterback under certain situations that tried to levelize the playing field in that way. Actually, Tavius Robinson is one of the players who I think looked substantially better when you adjusted for the sorts of snaps he was playing. And I'm sure a player like Lawson would look worse. So the fact that he was 71st out of 119 last year is not a good thing for big expectations of pressure. So when you're looking for the reasons why Lawson is still on the market at this point, because he's been a relatively successful guy at putting the quarterback on the ground for a number of years, but it hasn't happened as much recently with an injury year, followed by the 5-sack year at Dallas last year, where his pass rush productivity was off. There are reasons why he would be one of the last guys to come off the market. The Ravens have got him. I'm sure it's for the vet minimum, and hopefully this will help them out in some ways to at least eat up some snaps for the rest of the year. He's just an adequate run defender. A 15.9% career missed tackle rate is a little bit high, and a 4.1 stop to missed tackle rate is okay, but situational pass rushers have some advantages there in terms of being in the backfield and getting some TFLs from the edge that help with the higher stop numbers if they don't have a significant number of missed tackles. I would say just that's right in the average range for an edge defender. It would be probably a little bit better than that if you were an inside linebacker, having a total like that. But the edge rushers, because they pick up some sacks, and I believe those are included in those stop totals, though I don't exactly know PFF's formulas for putting that together. They would have an advantage based on those sack totals. All right, coverage. He's not been a good player when he's been asked to cover. Very infrequently, though. 4% of his career snaps have been dropping to coverage. So the Ravens had a couple guys who have been at very different ends of the spectrum in terms of how often their teams have asked them to cover over their careers. And Kyle Van Noy has, 1,500 or so coverage snaps in his career. Might be more than that. Whereas Jadeveon Clowney was very similar to Lawson in terms of being a guy who had about 3% career coverage snaps. It was just always considered kind of a waste of his talents to drop him to cover. And I think that's the case with Lawson as well, is that this is not an area where he's excels at. At 6'2", 260 now, and you would figure at 30, he's probably lost some of the speed he had. He's a guy who would not be an ideal drop to cover guy. If you look at him on film, what you'll see is a guy who likes to bull rush a lot. It does have other moves in the cupboard. He has a decent cross chop. He has some ability to spin, but the reason he often likes either a straight bull rush or a speed to power move is because that's really who he is. He needs to get under the into the elbow, I'll say, of a left or right tackle to hopefully draw some penalties himself, because he is a guy. He's not hulkingly tall like a lot of guys. There's also not James Harrison at 6 feet even, where he can immediately be sticking his nose into the elbow of the typical left tackle in the league. But he is a guy who is going to be shorter than most of the guys and going to be less long than most of the guys he faces. So he has to have other hand fighting moves to get by them. We've seen that some of the things I've mentioned here with cross chop in particular is something that he would go to. He's got a decent rip move as well, and you'll probably see that on display. But most of what he tries to do, he tries to get to the body. He tries to extend and uses leverage effectively to rush the passer. So anyway, this is a guy hopefully who can help the Ravens a little bit. I think I talked about his coverage. When he was in coverage, he surrendered 11.8 yards per target career. It's only 15 targets, and there's only been 2 of those since he left Cincinnati. So after the 2020 season, he left Cincinnati. He's only been targeted twice in those years. So it's real questionable as to whether those targets have meaning. But I think since he hasn't been dropping to coverage effectively over that period, I would say that it's fair to say he's not a coverage asset at this point in his career. How the Ravens will likely use him, I expect him to be used as a situational pass rusher. He'll probably be one of the most extreme players on the Ravens in terms of when he's on the field on obvious passing downs. Could well be a guy that if the Ravens get into some closeout situations, they'd like to have on the field more. We talked about that for Aeneas Peebles a fair amount this offseason, because it's hard to see exactly how he gets on the field in situations where the other team might run the ball. But if the other team needs to pass, then he's a great player to have on the field for 4 and 6 down stretches where he might be able to give you some real penetration, be in the backfield. Lawson, a similar player in terms of you'd much prefer to have him on the field on obvious passing situations. I think that's what the Ravens will do. This underscores a problem the Ravens have you could potentially look at Lawson as a replacement for Owe in terms of type of snaps he plays. I don't think he'll be as good as Owe, by the way. But I think that you could point to him as being being a replacement for those same number and those types of snaps, obvious passing situations, 2nd and 10, 3rd and 7 plus, 3rd and 5 plus probably. We'll see Carl Lawson on the field a fair amount for the Ravens, but he's not a replacement for Tavius Robinson. Tavius Robinson was the Ravens' most versatile edge defender, could play run or pass downs. He could kick inside. That's not Lawson's game. Lawson might be big enough to kick inside. I don't think we'll see it. I think the Ravens have too much need on the edge, and they have some players they can use on the interior, Jones and Peebles being a reasonable pass rushing duo from the inside that we may see more. So I don't expect Lawson to be a guy that they'd kick inside and put 3 outside linebackers on the field. If they did, they might put 3 outside linebackers on the field. They might have Van Noy line up off ball and try and find his gap that way. They have some other options. Obviously, the Hamilton taking advantage of the edge rushers is another thing Ravens will try and a button they'll have to push schematically to try and dial it up for the Bears in this game, because they really need to get after the quarterback, obviously, and are having trouble doing it. They don't have the early down replacement for Tavius Robinson at all. So we talked about the pass rushing stuff and not really having the replacement for Tavius, but they really do not have the early down replacement. And who's going to play the run? I think it has to be some combination of Ham, Ajabo, and I don't have a lot of faith that that's frankly going to work out. But Ham, is a player who'll get a chance. I think we'll get a tremendous effort from Ham in this game if he's the guy. Same from Rucker if he's the guy. But Ham will also play a ton of special teams for the Ravens. In a lot of ways, if Ham were to succeed here, I think we might be nearing the end of the David Ajabo era in Baltimore. So if we saw a couple good games out of Ham during a stretch where they need him as an extra outside linebacker, and possibly even after Lawson is activated to his first game, which might come as early as Miami, or it might be the first game back, which would be Minnesota after that mini bye, then we might see Ham take Ajabo's spot effectively on the roster. I think we're probably closing in on that point. The Ravens, obviously, Harbaugh in particular, said a lot of things this summer, kind of defending Ajabo and his work ethic and whatnot. But the guy's not playing. I mean, they're not putting him in the game when he's available, and they have no other options. That's a pretty good time to finally move on from a player like Ajabo. And I think the Ravens may, in the next few weeks, if they see something from Ham. Particularly, it wouldn't even necessarily have to be anything spectacular at the edge. If he gave them play that was similar to Ajabo on the edge, but he provides a special teams, 15 snaps on special teams, and then he's a big on special teams, which those are the guys you really are typically short of. He could make up part of the interior of the punt team. Then I think that could potentially signal the end for Ajabo, and he'd probably be gone. Probably get another chance somewhere else. Some other team probably, will try and see if they can turn him into a reclamation project and turn his career around. Obviously, not a pick that has worked out for the Ravens so far, but there's still hope for him personally in terms of what would go on. The other possibility the Ravens have in terms of replacing Tavius Robinson's edge snaps is putting Brent Urban out there. Now, Brent Urban has played some uncovered end for the Ravens. What do I mean by that? Well, uncovered end means you only play one outside linebacker and otherwise have your base personnel on the field. So, and you could have 3 inside linebackers on a play like that, or you could have 2 inside linebackers and a nickel other. It's typically would be an uncovered nickel, would be in the packages that I report every week in the articles that you would see. It would be typically an Urban on the edge snap. And I think it's possible in their extreme need that the Ravens may ask Urban to play some sort of hybrid outside linebacker role where he effectively plays a lot of snaps on the outside shoulder of an offensive tackle or even a tight end in this game. So that would be really moving him. He's typical way Urban has been used in his career has been as a 5-tech in a 3-down lineman situation where there's 2 outside linebackers flanking him. And there he would have typically lined up as a 4 or a 5-tech, 4-eye or 5. And in those positions, he'd be on the outside shoulder of tackle as a 5. What I'm really saying is you could play him on the strong side of the field and put him outside the tight end. That might give him a significant advantage in terms of trying to hold the edge on that side. And Urban is one of the good space deniers on the Ravens team defensively. So he's one of the guys who understands it's really kind of a complex job in itself. Never really made it as a pass rusher personally, but he did provide, certainly the Ravens a fair amount of run defense over the years. And I think they could call on him for kind of a hybrid role like that in this very extreme need they find themselves in. So anyway, Lawson, he replaces Owe in a way, at least in terms of the types of snaps he'll play. He doesn't replace Robinson in terms of what the Ravens need for early down defense. Well, that's going to do it for this. Thanks for listening, folks. I'll be doing some still film study shorts for the rest of this year. Going to be a very busy week between the 2 games in 5 days. But then after that Miami game, there will be opportunities for a couple of shorts. So if you'd like to be on with me and talk about something you're passionate about, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter, and I'd love to hear from you. That'll do it, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.